them and visiting with them. Oh, thank you. In visiting with them, they were telling me about some processes that they are um, using. I don't know if they're tweaking them for this year or if they are brand new. Tessa, you can tell us about that, and Lisel. But we're very lucky to have Tessa Ramos and Lisel Osuna, my daughter, presenting today. I can't take credit for this beautiful lady, but they're presenting today on some amazing practices. Talk about drilling down to the student level of data and really providing the support that students need so that every single one of them makes growth. So without further ado, we will record the session because I know I'll get the request for this because it's a great session. And so without any further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Tessa and Lisel. Thank you, ladies, again for taking the time beforehand, the preparation, and for being here this afternoon.
Thank you, Ms. Osuna, and thank you everyone for being here for today's training. It looks like we're going to have a small group here today, so we may not need to do breakout rooms at the time. We'll kind of just share and discuss as we go through the presentation, okay? So the only thing that I would ask is if you're a teacher, if you want to go ahead and have a tab open with STEMscopes, because sometimes when you click on the links, if you don't have STEMscopes open on a separate tab, it won't take you to it. You'll get an error message, okay? So that's my only recommendation. If you wanna go ahead and have, log into STEMscopes and have it open on a separate tab, and you might need some scratch paper along the way to do some of the work that we're gonna be doing in today's training, okay? So my name is Tessa Ramos, and I'm the Math and Science Instructional Coach at Lancaster Elementary. And then my wonderful partner is?
My name is Lisel Osuna, and I'm the ELAR coach here at Lancaster. Thank you for joining us this afternoon.
So I'm going to go ahead and get started and present my screen. Throughout the presentation, if anyone has questions or comments, go ahead and just unmute your mic. You can raise your hand icon and jump in, and that way we can address the questions at that time as best as we can. Okay, so for today's presentation, what we are looking at is leveraging our unit assessment, our checkpoint 1 data to be able to drive our guided math instruction and then gear it towards our stations. Okay, so that's the purpose of today's training.
Now the agenda that we have prepared for you all is on the screen right now. Some of the things that we would like to discuss with you is, first of all, establishing testing protocols when we are assessing our students so that when we get the data, that data is valid, right? We want to get data that is as accurate as possible so that when we are making decisions about interventions or guided math instruction or guided reading instruction, we are really targeting the needs of our students. So first of all, we thought that it was really important that we discuss those protocols with you all because sometimes we forget. These are some things that we know, but sometimes we forget. Other things that we're going to be discussing with you all this afternoon is data, of course, providing feedback. How do we provide feedback to our students that is meaningful to them? How do we chart our data on data walls and data binders with our students? And then the main focus of this presentation is going to be looking at the students' work and really analyzing their responses to identify error patterns. Because what we want to do is once we identify those error patterns, we are going to be using that information to drive our guided math lessons and also our stations. Of course, with that said, we're going to discuss guided math, the stations for interventions, and one of the other very important things that we want to emphasize this afternoon is post-assessing our students to see if they made growth with the interventions that we provided for them.
Okay, perfect. So we're going to go ahead and get started with our first part of our agenda, which is the testing protocol. This really is the first step that needs to be set when we're going to be really looking at meaningful student work to analyze error patterns. If we don't have great testing protocols in place, then kids are probably not showing work, and then the teacher has nothing to go back to help the students to really target what they need in their intervention or their guided math time. So we want you to take this time to be a little bit reflective, and there's a Jamboard link on here. If you'll go ahead and click on the Jamboard link, and then I can also, or Ms. Osuna, if you can put it, Lisel, if you can put the link in the chat box. Once you click on it, and principals, you can do this as well if you'd like. If you want to go ahead and just talk about what testing procedures and expectations do you yourself as a classroom teacher or your teachers have in place on assessment days. So if you'll just take a sticky real quick and then just write down what testing procedures or protocols, expectations that you have in place for your students on assessment days. This is really the first step or the first piece in order for us as teachers to be able to analyze our data. Think about this first checkpoint, and you know, what expectations were kids expected to show work for each and every problem? As the teacher, where are you throughout the testing cycle as your kids are testing? Maybe think about what are you doing as your students are testing? If you would like to also just share it, you can share it out. If you don't want to write it on a Post-it, that's fine as well. So I see someone here wrote that ensuring that teachers are actively monitoring and giving feedback about work demonstrated and staying focused and on task. And that's important, definitely. You know, when we're giving our assessment on those days, teachers should be walking around. We should be checking and checking in with our students and to ensure that they are producing the expectations that we want them to show. For example, if we have the expectation that for every problem in math, students have to represent using the strict diagram, and then holding them accountable for also writing the equation, that as their students are testing, we're making sure that they're doing that, walking around and just, you know, having discussions with students that aren't maybe. I think another thing that's important is that we let the students know why we need them to show their work, that it's so that we can help them if they're struggling with something. Okay. Would any one of you like to share out what you wrote? Do we have any risk takers out there would just like to read your sticky note?
I will. My name is Lorena Ayala. I'm from Capistrano. I'm the school librarian, actually, not the teacher, but we are a blended learning campus. So one of the things that we did start doing, and it's very simple, is just simply having the students go to the computer lab to take their iStation, iSIM test, for the reason to change the environment and, you know, from the classroom to the computer lab, and for them to see that it is a very serious assessment. And every month it needs to be taken seriously, and teachers can actively monitor while they're also in the computer lab. So that's just something we did, just, you know, to see, to convey a message to the students, in other words.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Thank you, Ms. Ayala. And that's important. You know, you talked about kind of changing the setting for them so that they know on that day, it's important. You need to take this serious, right? Just like we would on when STAR rolls around. So that's great. Thank you for sharing that. Would anyone else like to share out what your procedures or protocols are on on assessment days? What I am seeing is that a lot of you all are writing the fact that actively walking around, monitoring. And so, yes, definitely, that is key so that students know, oh, my teacher's checking on me. She's setting those expectations. Like, she knows I need to show my work. So that holds that accountability part on for the students, and that they know that you're checking in with them. And that's important for our kiddos. Okay. So thank you so much for sharing that.
I had something to share.
Okay.
I teach first grade at Parkland Elementary, and this was the first time that the students actually took tests like this. And so it was very different for them. Like they were very unsure of how to even circle, like what to do with their paper. And so it was a long process. And hopefully in the second checkpoint, it'll be a little bit faster. But it just took longer because they started circling all of the answers. They were, and so we had to like go step by step.
And thank you for sharing that, because with the little ones, it is very different. And it really takes the focus off what they're doing and the content. And it changes it to more procedural, right? Like, do they know how to flip the test to be on the right question? Circling, as you said, they were probably just circling every answer choice, not really knowing how to take an assessment like that. So those were some difficulties, definitely, that I know teachers in the lower grades were sharing when we came back to PLC. Those were some of the concerns. And actually we even shared those concerns before they took the assessment, because we wanted to make sure that that wasn't going to be an obstacle for the kiddos. And so we had even discussed some grade levels like kindergarten, they were going to do it all oral because they didn't want it to be a distractor for the students. So yes, definitely, that was something to consider in the lower grades. Thank you for sharing that. Anybody else want to share an experience or a comment on testing protocol? Okay, so what we did, I want to share some data from our fourth grade team. As you can see here on the presentation, this is from the first checkpoint, grade 4 math assessment. And at our campus, we're really tracking the students by STAR performance levels. We're looking at the numbers that are meeting, because we know that that's where students are at grade level. So we have 7 different sections of fourth grade classes. One of the classes is an SSB, behavioral unit, but we do have 6 regular general fourth grade classrooms. And so what we noticed when we were doing our data dig is that one of our teachers, Miss Irais Chavez, she had a high number of students meeting on this first checkpoint. She had 72%. Compared to, her colleagues with 52% or 53% the next one. We had one teacher that had 10%, 6%, and you can see it here, it ranges. So we had discussions with Ms. Chavez, and we said, Ms. Chavez, what testing protocols did you have in place? And so she shared what she did for that first assessment, and she did a quick screencastify. So I want to share it with you. Because this might spark an idea, maybe that if you hadn't been doing something like this, and they're just some simple protocols to have in place to ensure that students are showing their work. So we're going to take about 3 minutes just to watch her screencastify on how she administered that first checkpoint.
Hi guys, so I was asked if I could just share the way I did the math checkpoint. Nothing crazy. It's not, oh my gosh. Okay, all I did was, so the kids had it, the questions, I had them projected onto my IBD board. And then I asked them to fold their paper, which was in 4 parts. So they did the 4 parts. I told them, okay, go ahead and number them 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. On another people, 9, 10, 11, 12. The side 13, 14, 15. and this was what their outcome was. So as you can see, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I made sure that they worked it out. They had to show me every single one of them. Then we did it one at a time. Like I went to number 1, I projected it on my IBD board, do number 1. Give me thumbs up when you're done with number 1. And some kiddos were done pretty quick with number 1, but I wanted them to really, I was walking around making sure they did number 1. So even like all their work. So they were there waiting, like, I'm done. I said, guys, we're going to get this down. You're going to wait. So once everybody had their thumbs up, okay, let's go to number 2. Let me project number 2. There you go. Show me your work. Sorry, backwards. There's number 2, number 3, number 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15. And I made them circle their answers. They had their answers, so they knew. And then once they were all done, and this took us 2 days. We did it in 2 days. We did 1 through 8 on one day, and then we did 9 through 15 on another day. And that day when we did the second part, I also told them to open up their Eduphoria, their AwareCat, and they had side by side. Oh no, I'm sorry. I'm thinking of the Jamboard one. That's for reading. No, this is for math. So they had it open and they had this with them. So they were going, to their question number 1. They looked at what they answered and they put the answer. Nothing crazy. That's what we did. I just made sure I was walking around, make sure you showed me your work. You cannot move on. That's about it. For my reading, that one I did have the Jamboard. That they worked everything out on Jamboard. They did their notes for the paragraphs. For each paragraph they took a note, and then the questions, and it was 2 reading assessments. 2 reading texts. So we did one on one day, the next one on the other day, and then that day we had the Jamboard and the Aware on double screen. So they were going to their answers. What did they put? And they had both screens on one full screen. So that's what I did for the math. I'm telling you, it's nothing big.
Okay, so as we can see with Ms. Chavez's class, even though it wasn't anything like great and grand, she didn't have to think of anything except using, her theme paper. But I think one of the important things that she said is, I walked around number 1, number 2, which many of you said you already have that in place. Number 2, they couldn't move on until they showed me their work. And so as I was looking at the student work, I even thought, okay, we could have taken this a little bit further, because I noticed that some kids on the work she was showing, they went straight to the numbers, straight to the standard algorithm. So maybe even thinking about and having this standard across the board, maybe having them first, before they even take it to that standard algorithm and the numbers, ensuring that they are representing for each and every problem in a strip diagram, and then also having them write their number, their equation that goes with the strip diagram, because that's going to be vital information for me as a classroom teacher when I go back and I analyze error patterns. Is the error in the fact that they don't know how to represent using a strip diagram? Or could it be that maybe they don't know how to take the strip diagram and turn it into an equation? So those are the things that might be helpful for us as teachers to be able to really pinpoint what part of the SE or the intervention that I need to give that child intervention on during guided math. Okay, so we wanted to share that with you, because this is something that our teachers are really doing as far as testing protocol is concerned. Okay. Are there any questions at this point? Okay.
No questions.
Perfect. So we'll go on to the next part.
Now, after the students have understood, first of all, the importance of the assessment, right? And we have provided with that testing environment that is so vital, because like I mentioned before, we want to get accurate results, as accurate as possible, so that we can drive those interventions and those lessons. So right after they assess, we as teachers need to be prompt at giving them feedback. We cannot wait a week, 2 weeks to analyze the data or to give them those reports, because after a week or two, that data is already old. It's not gonna have the same impact on the students as if we right away give them their results, the SEs that they mastered, the SEs that they still need to work on. So on this slide, as you can see, we mentioned that we need to be providing that feedback within really 24 hours, so that the information is fresh in their minds and also in ours as teachers, right? When we provide that feedback, one of the things that we should be doing is identifying the focus SEs. You know that on a given assessment, we're gonna have many SEs that were assessed. But as teachers, we need to know which ones are we gonna focus on, because we cannot focus on everything. Sometimes that's too much. We have to go a little bit at a time. So we're gonna be identifying on our data reports which ones of those SEs are readiness, which ones are supporting, which ones are highly tested, and we use our frequency distribution chart for that. At this point, we should be having our at-a-glance document out so that we can identify the past data. How did we do on the unit assessments last year compared to this year? How did we do on STAR last year? And how have we done historically? So we as teachers need to be very knowledgeable about those things, because we are also using this time to reflect on our own teaching, right? Our tier 1 instruction. How is our class doing compared to previous years? So again, right after you assess your students, immediately pull that data, show it to the students the following day. And then after that, we're going to ask them to track that data on their data walls and data binders.
Okay, so this would be the next step in the process of being able to leverage that data to really target our guided math and our station instruction, right? So if we look here, just as LaSalle had mentioned, we wanted to share a few of the data trackers that our teachers are using at our campus. And so they start with charting their overall assessment scores on their student math graphs here. And we did link, everything's linkable on here. So if you're on the PowerPoint, you can just click on it and it'll take you to a drive where we threw in some of these so that they're ready to go for you. We didn't want you to have to go and pull. If you don't already have one in place, you can feel free to use these. And so we threw one in there for reading data. And then this one is blank. So in case you wanted to put your own measures here on the side. And then the same thing for math. What's important about this one is that one of our teachers here, our third grade teachers, what she has the kids do is she writes across the bottom which checkpoint it was, and she has the students color coded. And so anything 70 or below would have been in yellow. Would have been in red. Okay, those would be like your did not meet. Anything between 70 and 90, the children would chart it in yellow, and then 90 or above would be green. And then another thing that's important is that once kids chart this, and then they chart it on the data wall by SE, so that the students know what standards they need to go back and work on. Here's an example of one that a teacher has, or that did. This is from a previous year. But you can clearly see, and what I like about this one is the fact that if you can see here, it's by the standard, but this teacher obviously gave a post-assessment after she provided interventions for her students, because you can see that at first they were red here on 44H, looking at dairy here. And then he went back, worked on it, and then he grew. And so that's what's important for our children, to take that ownership and to know that, you know what, I'm growing. And they can clearly see it by using a system like this that's in place. You have it up on your data wall, and the kids can go and they can chart their growth. So that one is a great example of that. This one here is one that we created for our teachers. It's just a template. And what our teachers did at Lancaster was we made posters. I have it for the 2nd through 3rd grade through 5th grade standards. If you're a 2nd grade teacher, you can click on it. They are all the readiness standards. And so here you would just jot your students' names down, and then of course using those the dots, they could chart by SE so that the students know which SEs they need to work on, and you as the teacher know as well. And then the children can go back and chart their growth, how they did on their post-assessment. Another thing is, again, we were focusing on our readiness standards. And I think one of the most important things is to set a goal for the students. The goal setting part is very important when you're going over data and you're charting. For example, the unit assessment checkpoint, on the first one, this child got a 71, and you can set her goal. Maybe on checkpoint 2, we need you to grow. You know, do you think you can get a 75? Even though it's testing different standards, that's okay. It's, you know, different units. However, she can still shoot for, you know, she definitely wants to maintain in the approaches in the yellow, but we want to keep raising the bar each time. And so when kids are doing this, it really gets them excited about going back, and on day to day after they take that assessment, they know, okay, let's go ahead and let's pull out our math graph and let's chart to see where we fell this time. So, you know, it really makes a difference for the kids and gets them involved, and it gives them that ownership of, you know, these are my scores and I want to improve. Okay. Are there any questions at this point? Okay, so then let's go on to the next part.
Okay, teacher. So at this point, we're gonna get a little bit on the hands-on part of this presentation. This template that you see here, it's also linked to our folder. You can print it if you want to use it later. But for now, if you can just get a piece of paper, any type of paper, because we're going to be using a set of data from our campus as an example. And we're going to take you through the whole process of how to chart your data, how to identify the error patterns based on students' work. So if at this point you can just get a piece of paper and fold it into 3 sections. You can fold it into 3 sections. And on the first section, we are going to just jot down our percentages in approaches, meets, and masters. So let's pretend, you know, that we assessed our students yesterday and we printed our report today. We have it in front of us. And the first thing that we want to track is, okay, what are our percentages for approaches, for meets, and for masters? So as you can see on the template that we are using here at Lancaster, there's a section there that just has a space for us to write those down. So if you can just write approaches for now, approaches, meets, and masters on your paper. And of course, this is for checkpoint 1. Now, this is the data that we brought for you this afternoon to use as an example. This teacher is a 3rd grade teacher. And you can see here that we can see the total number of students, and then we have the percentages for each of the categories. So as you look at the report, you can see that 25% approached, right? 25% of our students approached. Then how many mastered? Who can see? Is it too small or can you see it? What is the percentage of meets?
We can see it, Ms. Lisa.
Perfect. So the percentage of meets, as you can see here, is 6.25, right? You can round it up. And then masters, she also has the same, 6.25. So just round it off. So I would write on my paper, 25% for approaches, 6% for meets, and about 6% for masters. So this gives me an idea of how my class is doing overall, right? Remember that our target is 90% approaching, 60% meeting, and then 30% mastering. Now, also consider that this is the beginning of the school year. So we also have to keep that in mind. But we need to work towards that goal, right? And our class needs to have that goal as well. We need to have it posted on our wall. They need to know what are we working for. And we need to know how far away are we from that goal and what are we going to do about it. So that's the first step. Now, the other step is I'm going to dig deeper into my reports on Aware, and I'm going to go ahead and print the report by SE, by Learning Standard. So you can see it here at the bottom for this particular teacher. She has her checkpoint 1 math report, and you can see all the standards listed and the percentages for each of the standards. Now, if you notice underneath each of the standards, it tells us if it's a process standard, if it's a readiness, or a supporting. So what we're going to do in the second column in our paper, we are going to write readiness and then supporting. We're going to have 2 categories, and we are just going to identify which of the standards in this assessment were readiness and which ones were supporting, and we're going to write down the percentages for each one. So for example, I'm going to start with my readiness. And looking at this report, I would choose, for example, 3.2a, right? That's one of my readiness. And the class got about a 13% on that one, which is pretty low. We definitely need to work on that one. And then under supporting standards, I see the 3.2b. And on that one, the class got a 63%, right? So I'm gonna do the same. I'm gonna go through my whole report, and I'm gonna just write down the list of my readiness standards and the percentage, and the list of the supporting standards and the percentage. So if you could please do that at this moment. I'm gonna give you about 3-4 minutes. Okay. Is everyone about done? Show me thumbs up. Perfect. Okay, so how many readiness standards were you able to identify? Anyone? I'm gonna have to be teacher. Thank you, Ms. Osuna. You get a star. We have 5, right? 5 readiness standards, and then we have 4 supporting. Is that correct? Did everybody get the same thing? So now you have all the readiness standards. You see the percentages. You see where your class has fallen under each of those standards, and then you have the supporting. I can see that this class is a little bit higher on some of the supporting than on some of the readiness, right? So we can tell right away. Now, like I tell you, when it comes to making decisions about stations, we understand that we cannot have a station for everything. So we need to be very smart about how are we going to handle this. And we know that the readiness standards are the standards that are highly tested. So one of the suggestions that we will give you is, if you're starting your stations, go ahead and start with the readiness ones. And then if you have more time throughout the year to target the supporting, you can go ahead and target those, but always start with the readiness. So I would probably identify from here my lowest ones, right? Which is 3.2A, the class got a 13%. That one is very low. 3.4A, they got a 42%. And then I see 3.7B, they got a 56%. So those are my three lowest. So just by writing this down, I already see how my class is doing, right? Which SCs do I need to reteach? Which ones am I gonna target through guided math? Which kind of stations do I need in my class? Okay, so after that, let's move on to the next step, and Tessa will explain it to you.
Yes, okay, perfect. Thank you, Lisel. So on this third grade assessment, just as Lisel had said, we identified 3.2A, which is one of the one where the kids have to decompose and compose numbers and represent them in expanded form, different forms, expanded notation, which is actually new to third grade. So we know that looking at by student and by SC, several kids need work on there. So the next part would be to group our students. We've identified the 3 standards we're going to focus on. And for this test, we're going to focus on 3.2A. So we would chart on this next form here, and we did attach it. I just want to show it to you really quickly. We're going to group the children by their need. Which children need that 3.2A? Okay, so that's what we would do. That would be the next step in your process as a teacher. You would put the target SE right here in the middle, 3.2A, write your quick description on it, and then you would group what students you're going to target that with. But even further than that, we're also going to take you to identify error patterns, and that's, I think, a lot of the times we as teachers, we see, okay, 3.2A, it was so low. And I need to work on that. And we pull something and we go back and we teach the whole SC. And really, we're not really targeting. And then it's overwhelming for us as a teacher. I have to go back and teach it. How many different ways? I need to teach standard form, expanded form. But we haven't even looked at the student work from their assessment to really identify what error patterns are they doing, and so that I can group my students that way. And that's the main focus of today's presentation. This is really the meat of our presentation. We want to, after we've identified those high priority standards, readiness standards, which kids need it, then the next part is going and analyzing the student work to look for error patterns. So that's what we're gonna do on this next portion. And I know a lot of times, and even when I was in the classroom, that's the part that I missed. That was my missing link. I didn't go back and look specifically what part of that SC do I have to go back and teach, and for which children, okay? So I'm gonna walk you through it. This is another Jamboard, but we can do it together. If you wanna click there on the link, and Lisel, maybe if we can put the link into the chat box so that teachers can jump on it. But we're actually gonna look at some examples of student work from this class. And so if we start with that 3.2A, the very question number 1 was on 3.2A. And so what we're gonna do is we're gonna analyze the student responses. I just picked 5 students. I asked the teacher, please share with me their math notebooks that had the test in there. And I said, any 5 children, doesn't matter, let's pull them. And because we wanna look at how would we group these 5 students. If these were students in our classroom, and then based on that, what part of the SE would we target? So I'm gonna give you a few minutes. If you can please look at the student work. The question was, the expanded notation of a number is shown, and it gives it to them there. What is the standard form of this number? Okay. Look at the 5 students, and then please jot down on your scratch paper, how would you group these students for intervention, and what would you target? What do they need? What part of the SE do they need? So we're gonna give you about 3 to 4 minutes to do this next part. And actually on this one, we teachers, we would actually, based on the students we grouped that needed 3-2A, those are the tests we would pull. And those are the ones that we would be identifying how to group those students together. It would be all the ones that just need 3-2A. Can you give us a thumbs up if you're done, if you know how you would group these 5 students, and then what error pattern did you identify? What part of that SC would you have to target? Or do we need a little bit more time? Ms. LaSalle, can you see if the teachers are ready to kind of share out?
I think they need 1 more minute, Tessa.
Okay, perfect.
If you want to put it in the chat box, you can do that too. How would you group the students? And maybe just give us a gist as to why. What would you target? Okay, we have one comment. It says, I would put them together and target using a place value chart when taking a decomposed number back to standard form. Now, which students would need that specifically? For example, student number 1 would be paired with who? Who would you put him with?
So if we're looking at student number 1, we can see that they gave it to us in Word form, and student number 3 did as well. So if we look at those students, we know that with those students, they would need vocabulary. They didn't understand what standard form meant. Mm-hmm. And we can see that where students 2, 4, and 5, and I agree with the teacher, right? They need that, a whole lesson on going from the expanded notation into standard form. They need to probably build it again with the base 10 box, something concrete, but again, then using the place value chart to write how many in each place value, right? So those students are gonna need support during guided math time before we send them to a station to practice this part of the SC on 3-2A. With student 1 and 3, it might just be going back and going over vocabulary with them, having them write it in standard form, Word form, and so forth, maybe using a graphic organizer with that. Because I think if they would have known what standard form meant, it could have clarified, and they would have probably maybe have gotten the question correct. Do you see anything different in the comment box, Ms. LaSalle?
Yes, Cesar. Ms. Valdez has raised her hand.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I wanted to, instead of typing it in, just comment on how I would have grouped them. I'm assuming that I would have put group 1 needs less support and then group 3 the most. Is that how I interpret the chart?
And so it was based on looking at the error patterns on the student samples here on the Jamboard.
Okay, so then if I mean, if I'm kind of seeing it your
Mhm.
way, I would put 5 and 3 together because I think they need the less help. I mean, of course, one wrote it in with numbers and then the other one was words. So, I mean, they understand what they're doing. 5 understood what they were doing very well. And the other one, like you were saying, was student 3. They just need to kind of tweak it to show me in numbers, but they pretty much have it correct. If I'm looking, I mean, if I can see the answer correct and everything. And then I would put 1 and 2 together, 1 and 2, because 1 is missing information. Obviously, they don't have the concept all the way through. And then 2, they started, and then they're also have those gaps. So they're kind of both needing the same support there. And then 4 is kind of out there on their own. I mean, they obviously had nowhere to begin. They were clueless as to what to do, even partially.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so going back to our testing protocols, right? As the teacher and you're walking around and you see student 4 with nothing, this was the very first question, nothing written, you know, at that point, it's okay to kind of just stop and prompt them a little bit, because you know that this child has no idea conceptually of what to do. They have no understanding of this concept. So, you know, just to maybe trigger something and get them started, you would just kind of ask them, do you need help with this? And then give them a little bit of something that they can pull from and see if they can show you some type of thinking, right? But when they don't show any work, then we don't know, you know, obviously, well, it was obvious this child had no idea of where to begin. But, okay. Anybody else have anything different? No? Okay, so because of time, I know we're running down to the wire. I wanted to show you one more example based on this this unit assessment checkpoint. So we're going to jump to Jamboard number 4, if you don't mind. This was targeting that other readiness standard that we saw that our kids did low on. So once we would have grouped our children from our class data, who needs help on 3-4A? That was question number 7. Now on this one, it was a 2-step solving, because 3-4A is when students are actually solving addition and subtraction problems. And so through here, I just want to really quickly run you through. We have 4 student samples on this one. And I want you to focus on student 1. So on this one, it was about Eric's goal was to practice playing her guitar for 300 minutes this week. And then it gives us information that on Sunday, she practiced 117 minutes. And then on Tuesday, she practiced some more. She practiced 58 minutes. So the question is asking them, how many more minutes does Erica need to practice in order to meet her goal? So we know this is a 2-step. First, off the bat, students we can see are showing work in different ways, right? Some went straight to the number sentence. And I'm thinking maybe if we start having the students represent first using a strip diagram and then taking it to the number sentence, you know, having that testing protocol in place so that we can make sure that they're following those steps. So here's student 1. We can see that they're struggling with subtracting of zeros because they did the first part right. They added 117 plus 58, and they did that first step correctly. However, when they subtracted, they didn't regroup from the hundreds to borrow, to regroup, and the answer should have been 125. So right here, looking at the error pattern, I know I would need to group that student with anyone else that's having trouble subtracting with zeros, right? If we look at student 2, right here, they stopped after the first step. They were doing 117 plus 58, but even then, student 2 added incorrectly. So, and then they would benefit from some type of place value chart, maybe graph paper, where that they could align their numbers correctly. If we look at student 3, on student 3, they definitely need a place value chart to align, because as you can see here, they had step 1. They knew they needed to add 117 plus 58, but look at how they wrote 58. They put the 5 in the hundreds place instead of in the tens place. and they got this huge number here, 625, and then they were going to subtract. They knew they had to subtract, but they subtracted 625 minus 300, and that was incorrect there as well. Okay, so aligning and then knowing what they're subtracting from, that they were subtracting what they've already practiced from the total that they need to. So that's something that they would need. And then if we look at step 4, student forum, sorry, they added correctly. They did step 1, but then they stopped. So that's why I was saying, I think it's important that kids are representing using some type of graphic organizer, their strip diagram, so that they could have seen that this was a 2-step problem. And then holding them accountable for writing the equations that go with the strip diagram. So all these same students are in the same classroom, but yet they all have different error patterns and different needs on what we need to target. Again, just reiterating, that's why if we know 3-4A was low for our students and we group our students, but then we just send them to a station on 3-4A, we're really spinning our wheels because we're not targeting what the students need. What part of that SC do they really need to be successful on it? Another thing that I know sometimes we forget to do is we think, okay, our kids were low on 3-4A, that's a readiness standard, that's important. And we put a station in our classroom, and during station time, we have the kids go there without going back and providing a mini teach for them. So the first step, teachers, is after you've analyzed your 3 important SCs that you need to go back and intervene on with your students, you group your students, you've done your error patterns. The next step would be to bring them into small group guided math. You need to give them a mini lesson on their needs. What part do you need to target with those students before you send them to go practice at the station? Because I think sometimes that's a critical piece that we're missing. Yes, we know our data. Yes, we know we group our kids. We know what they need to work on, but then we send them straight to the station without intervening with that mini lesson during our guided math time. And then kids are just doing the station over and over, and they're doing it wrong each time, solidifying in their mind, the way to do it, which is wrong. And so I think that's one key component that, if anything, from today's training, that we walk away knowing that, okay, now my next step is I need to give them their mini lesson on what they need before I send them to the station. Okay. Any questions at this point, teachers? Okay. So we're going to go ahead and go on to the next part, because we do want to share some of the resources for stations that you could use, or some ideas for maybe you would use during your guided math time. Okay.
And just like Tessa mentioned, the guided math lesson is extremely important. Just like you saw, yes, you're going to group your student by SC, but then under that SC, you're going to form subgroups. For this SC, what is the error pattern for these students, and how am I going to group them? For some of them, it might be just a computation part of the SC that they are missing. Some of them need the whole concept, Some of them, they probably just need a graphic organizer, like the place value chart, the alignment of the digits. So when you pull them for the guided math lesson, you're going to be giving them that lesson targeted to their specific need based on the error pattern that they demonstrated on the assessment. Now, one of the important things that we do during guided math is that we follow the gradual release model. The goal is for them to be able to correct the error and then go into the station. So you first give you do the I do, right? You give your mini lesson, then you try it together as a group. You do the we do. And after you see that the student finally understood what the error was that they were making, and you correct it, then, only then, you send them to the station. You don't send them to the station, like Tessa said, without that mini lesson, because then they're gonna continue making that same mistake again and again, right? Now, during this guided math lesson, it is very important that you listen to your students for mathematical conversations. You want them to verbalize their thought processes so that you can further understand why are they making the mistakes that they are making. You're going to be listening, you're going to be observing the students' work, you're going to be using your manipulatives, and right there and then you're going to correct any misconceptions that they have. Once you see that they grasp the concept, then you go and then you release them into the station. But again, at some point, after they work on the station for a little bit, then you need to go back and check their work. You need to monitor those stations to make sure that they are doing the work right when they are doing it independently.
A lot of the times teachers, our principal tells us, you think about it when your children are sick, right? And you're trying to diagnose what they have, and then you give them medicine for it. So like, for example, if our children have a cough and we know it's in their chest, you know, we're not going to give them Tylenol for that. We're going to give them Vicks, right? And we're going to rub that Vicks on their chest, and we're going to rub it on their feet and put some socks on them, because we know that that's what they need, right? To help get that congestion, loosen it. So I think that's a lot of the time. Sometimes we spin our wheels with, you know, but I went back and I put it at the station and they still didn't learn it. And so just being aware that maybe just that little tweak of, you know, analyzing error patterns and then giving that mini lesson, can't stress how important that part is. Okay. All right, real quick, we wanted to go ahead and share some stations for intervention ideas. They're all linkable here. You can go into them. The only one I really wanted to point out to you was, I just want to go into the first one because I wasn't sure if you all were aware, STEM scopes, because a lot of the times teachers, we don't want to spin our wheels and looking and paying for other ideas and activities to use in our stations when we already have certain resources, right, that are aligned to our standards. That's what's most important, is the alignment there. So STEM Scopes has tic-tac-toe kind of choice menus already created for every grade, kinder through 5th grade, right, for every concept that are awesome. It is actually found under the very first tab when you go into STEM Scopes. If you scroll onto that first tab and you go down to the parent letter, I don't know if you all were aware it was there. This is where you would find it. So another thing I recommend is, because sometimes a lot of our parents want to be involved. So if you have Class Dojo or if you send anything home, send that parent letter. They come in English and in Spanish so that parents are aware what their students are studying and during math for that unit. And it gives them examples. It shows them the strategies you're using, and it gives them problems to practice. And it also mentions the vocabulary in there, which is important. And it gives them ideas on how they could encourage their children to share the vocabulary and ideas on what they could do with their kids at home. So this is super important. I just wasn't sure if you were aware of it. It's under the parent letter. But this is the part I wanted to show you, because this tic-tac-toe kind of choice board is there for every concept that you teach, which is amazing. It's awesome. They're there in English and Spanish. And you can have the kids work on some of these that needed that graphic organizer. Here it is. The problem's there. It gives them ideas to do. So I don't want to take more of the time explaining it. I just want to show you really quickly. Teachers, give me a thumbs up if you know where to find this so that I don't waste time going and showing you in STEM Scopes. Lisa, are there any teachers that aren't sure where they would get this?
I do see some thumbs up, Tessa.
Okay.
So I think we're good.
Okay, and if not, if you don't know, I'll stay on after with you and I can show you really quickly how to find it. But that's a great resource if you're not leveraging this resource already for your stations. Also, the district has created pathways, intervention pathway lessons for 3rd through 5th. So if you're a 3rd through 5th grade teacher, those lessons are already housed in TRS. And what's great about these lessons is that the scaffold, because we know with our kids this year, we need to scaffold. So here's an example of a 3rd grade one. They're linked already. The activities are linked on here. And so those are there for you to use as well in TRS, for maybe if you want to use it for your guided math as your mini lesson, if it applies to what part of that SE you need to reteach for the kids, they're there. So really, Ms. Osuna and I wanted to leave you with some resources that are ready to use. We shared some of our intervention classrooms. They're linked there. for you to go into and kind of explore. But you can do that on your own if you're interested. Okay. Last piece I wanted to share with you all in closing is what's also very important, teachers, is that we make sure that we're giving a post-assessment for those interventions. And really all I did here was I had identified 3.2a, 3.4a, and 3.5a based on the data. And the reason I took 3.5a over the perimeter one, 3.7b, even though that one was lower, was because 3.5a is representing, first of all, addition and subtraction problems before they solve it on 3.4a. And so that one was a choice as a classroom teacher. Those are the three that I would work on: the representing, the solving, and then of course 3.2a, because our class was so low on it. All I did was, for the post-assessment, again, I went to STEMscopes, I pulled the STAR-based assessments for that unit, and I found similar questions to what they were tested on. 3.2a, here it is. It gives it an expanded notation, and then it asks them for standard form. So after I've given the mini lesson, they practice at the station. Here it is. Show me that you've mastered it, that you've solidified that standard. Same thing for 3.4a. We knew it was a two-step problem, addition with subtraction. And so I found one on STEMscopes, and so that way the kids could show me. And then here was one on representation, the 3.5a, using the strip diagram. Okay, and then they had to write it with the expression, because that's how they were tested on the unit assessment. It was which expression they could use with the model. And then the last piece is I really wanted to share this example of what this teacher was doing for goal setting, because we know that after the kids have tested, they get their data back, it's important to set goals with the teacher, or with the student, I'm sorry. So if you can see here in 3.2a, and this teacher was just starting, so it's not completely filled out the way we would want to see it, right? But we can see here in 3.2a, the children that struggled with it, okay, like for instance, let's look at Brianna really quickly. She got a 50 on the checkpoint. The teacher would set a goal with her. Okay, let's at least try, after you work on it, let's see if you can at least get a 60. 10-point increase, you're showing growth. That's where we need to be, right? But we can see on the post-assessment, she actually went to a 75. And so this is a huge part of children taking ownership of, okay, my growth, and charting it. As you can see here, this one was huge. Destiny, she got a 0 the first time. A goal, maybe you would have set a goal with her is, can you at least maybe get a 50, right? Let's make it attainable. She actually got 100. So I think this is an important step to do with our kiddos. If you're not already doing it, making sure that we're setting goals with them and then having them work on it and then charting their post-assessment, okay? And the last slide is Ms. Osuna had also placed in here some reading stations and interventions that you could use. Ms. Osuna, if you want to just touch on it really quickly.
Sure, and I just wanted to mention that the same process that we follow for the math can be used for the reading. The only thing is that we would have to ask the students to provide us with the answer, right? We would have to have the open-ended question, and then they would have to write the answer, and we would have to analyze their student responses to see if they understood the text, if they understood the question. So the same process applies to reading. And I went ahead and shared some of my Google Classrooms that I have created for interventions. As you can see, one of them is the word study stations, and I have all the word study concepts in there. So you can go ahead and take a look at some of the activities that I have there. Another one is organized by iStation cycles, where I provide extra resources for students. When teachers send them off to stations, they can work on the skills by cycle. And then the last one, Ms. Ramos, if you want to show the interventions one, this one is by SE. So this one provides more resources for teachers by SE if they want to place them into, let me go ahead and, if you want to, I can present. I just want to see it.
Is it the iStation cycles?
Try that one and then click on cycle 7, Ms. Ramos, just
okay.
An example.
I think this is it. Let me click on 7.
So this one is just providing extra resources, teachers, that you can place in your stations. So you would group your students by cycle, you would give them those activities, they would work on their iStation pathway, and then they would have extra support in the station. But the same process of identifying error patterns and misconceptions applies to the reading. The only difference is that we would have to ask open-ended questions and have the students actually write a response, a short student response. So some of you were mentioning that some of the links were not working for you all. I think we didn't open up the access to everyone. So we'll fix those links, and then you will have access to all the resources. We will be happy to share them with you. Hopefully you can use them in your classes as well. Okay?
Thank you so much, teachers, for continuing your growth.
Thank you, Tessa and Lisel. This is amazing. Thank you for sharing these amazing resources and your slides, and how you really are drilling down to the student level and the error pattern. So that is very helpful. You're amazing. And again, thank you so much for a very well organized and well presented way to data dig. Shelley, anything to add?
I just think you guys are awesome. You always do such a great job. And
Give
you
them
know,
a
the way
round of
you really
applause.
analyze and dig down deep into those standards, it's kudos to both of you. You're awesome.
Awesome job. Thank you,
Thank
ladies.
you all. Thank you, teachers, for
Thank-
joining us. And we apologize for taking a little bit longer, but I think it's
worries.
worth it.
Thank you. And we'll share the recording on our playlist in our Empowered Learning Google site. Okay. Thank you, ladies. You're
Thank you
amazing.
so much.
We'll
Have a
stay
nice
on
day.
if anyone has questions, okay? If you want to stay behind and ask us anything, we'll be here, okay?